Hey, what's up, comrades? Starting with a cough. Goodness gracious. All right. So we're here to talk about. I'm going to fuck this name up. I just listened to this too. Tezcatlipoca, something like that. It's the name of like an Aztec god, I want to say. Anyway, so this is an interesting book, not because it's good, because I don't like it. But it's because I usually don't read shit like this. But I started into it, and then it just kept going. And then this book almost feels like one of those books you read in like junior high, like Catcher on the Rye, shit like that, where it's just some like life story about some people, and then it like ends, and I was bored the whole way through. Like, I know this is supposed to be insightful or impactful or have some sort of thing or. This thing barely has like a coherent story, to be completely honest. Like the coherent story is, I'll sum it up at the end. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sum it up at the end. Now let's sum it up at the beginning. That way you can go ahead and turn this video off if you're not interested in what's going on. Okay, so this is a story about the lives of like four. It's really just the main story is about three individuals and how their lives interact, and then the resulting fallout from that. And these three people are a Japanese heart surgeon, a narco, like a Mexican cartel leader, and then a half Japanese, half Mexican boy who grows up in Japan. And yep, there you go. So you got the Japanese, you got the Mexican, and then you got the combination of the two. And you can already see why, if you follow any of my stuff, why I already don't like this very much, because I really, really, really dislike the thing where we bounce around between different protagonists in a story. Like, I feel like it is so hard to get done correctly, and I feel like most people do not do it very well. Like, it's just, you have to, and then you expand it out. And that's part of the problem with this is it expands out like way too much. Like, Game of Thrones, the whole story, in a bad way. I don't think Game of Thrones is good at all, so I guess there's no good way to really Game of Thrones something, to be completely honest. That book is so boring. God damn. I don't understand how that became popular. And the TV show is stupid. Like, I was watching Ninja Scroll in like the 1980s, and you're watching like people getting raped and cut in half and murdered, and then like 20 years later, people are like, oh, they have sex in this TV show. Like, I was like, the fuck have you been? Incest, please. This is milquetoast. The fuck are you talking about? Anyway, hey, whatever. You like what you like. So the story starts off, and it's a story of Lucilla, a Mexican girl. Yep. So not even one of the three main characters we spend the first several chapters with. So Lucilla grew up in a narco-infested town in Mexico, and the book does this thing. I hate this thing too. Michael Crichton does it, and with Michael Crichton, I love his books for the most part. Like, he writes thrillers, right? Like, so he wrote, because if you're not old like me, or older, Michael Crichton writes thrillers. He writes, the ones that most people are going to recognize are going to be like Jurassic Park. That's probably it. I'm trying to think. Oh, Sphere, Congo. I mean, those are old movies too, though. But Jurassic Park is his lasting legacy, really. And so if you've seen Jurassic Park, you kind of get the gist of what most of his stories. Most of his stories have some sort of thriller, mystery, to like crime solving thing. But then he likes to interject a lot of his like, I have a Harvard PhD bullshit research knowledge kind of stuff into things. But the way he does it generally is to expand. It's usually the characters are reflecting to themselves thoughts that they have about the particular situation that kind of help explain their motivations, right? So to me, it's a very thin line where it's like acceptable. Occasionally he goes off, and I zone out, right? Like if it's a book, like if I'm reading a physical book, I'll just kind of like skip ahead because I'm like, I don't give a fuck about this. If it's a book on tape, I'll just like stare off into the distance and like consider like the ramifications of my ancestors crossing the ocean. Shit like that. Just like, what would happen if I grew up in the fucking Kurdistania steppes, and then it's like, oh, people are talking again. That bullshit about microbiomes that the guy spent like 16 pages writing about. It's over. Like, I don't need that much information, Michael. Come on, rest in peace. But a lot of more current authors do this thing as well, but they do a very poor job of it. And this writer, and she's a Japanese author, does a very bad job of it. Now, this book isn't bad. Like, it's not like I'm reading Twilight, which, on a flip note, is fantastic, but written like a middle school child wrote it. But the story is very interesting. It's like Anne Rice if Anne Rice didn't know how to write like coherent sentences or put together a coherent plot. But it's still like, it's Anne Rice. So if you just kind of like ignore all the like spelling errors in a edited and published book, God damn it, you can get through it and you'll be like, this is kind of an interesting story. I gotta review Twilight on this. I love it. I can't lie. As you can tell, I don't like this book because I'm like so hesitant to like get into it. But okay, so I'm not going to talk about that. Like the majority of this book, the vast majority is the author, not even the characters in the book. The author explaining to a clearly Japanese audience what all this shit means, right? And it's annoying. Like, do a better job of writing your book. Have the characters talk about things. Have the characters interact. Like the characters are just like they're like puppets, right? Like they don't feel like people. Like there's not a single time I'm reading this book where any of these characters feel like an actual person. Hold up, that's a very definitive statement. Let me think. You know what? I'm going to take that back a little bit. I feel like Lucilla and then her son, who's actually one of the main characters, they feel like actual people at times. But the rest of the characters just feel like puppets. They're like, ooh, talk. Right? Like they don't feel like fleshed out actual human beings who have like emotions and motivations. They just kind of like do things and then things exist around them and then like plot happens. Which is very interesting now that I'm sitting here like talking about it and thinking about it. This is going to be a long fucking video, I know, I'm sorry. Because they're all so goddamn long. Lucilla, we get like all this motivation, all this discussion, all her feelings, all this stuff. So it's like, I think one of the things that really bothered me about this book is I'm starting to listen to it and I'm like, oh, modern day, woman protagonist, like all this shit I like do not like. And she's having periods and shit. God, what am I reading? Like, what is this? Like all this stuff. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, let's see where this goes. Like, I love me some hot Latinas. So like maybe this will be an interesting story. Like I read you can find this for free if you want. Like there's a book. There's a book. I can't remember. I think it's called Diary of a Girl. And then people accredit it to, not Young. God damn it. I'm like so retarded sometimes. Not Frank Sinatra. The psychoanalyst guy. Freud. People accredit it to Freud. But it's just he found a diary of this girl who lived like right before the Holocaust. Or like, right, like the beginning of World War II, and she just kind of like goes through life, and there's like a whole thing where she like kisses her friend to see what it's like. And this is not like a modern thing. This is literally this guy they found a diary from this little girl who was going through like her first period and stuff, and she just like writes about it, and it's like a case study. Like it's very interesting to just see like this girl like open up about all this crazy stuff. And the beginning of this book, I felt like that, like there was this kind of story, and I was like, you know what? It's good to know. It's good to develop. It's easier to develop empathy with individuals that are not yourself or not like you at all, like some white chick in Germany or Austria in like the 1920s. If you by learning more about them, what drives them, what motivates them, what's kind of going on in their lives, and then when you look at other people like modern white women who are insane about what motivates them, so you can have more empathy. So when you speak with them, you're not like jumping to conclusions. You're not trying to like force things upon them. You can just like listen and be like, okay, I get where you're coming from. So now we can like bargain better, right? Even for you, it's not even like, and the thing people misunderstand about empathy is that it doesn't benefit other people. It benefits you, because if you understand other people, it's easier to manipulate them or to get what you want out of them or to get through the conversation and to get to like a resolution that both people can find satisfying, right? Like empathy is not about, oh, sweetie, I feel your pain. I understand. No, it's about like, okay, what drives this individual to do what they're doing? Like this person's acting like a lunatic, but why? Right. So I would highly encourage developing empathy, not like it's described by crazy people who don't know what they're talking about, but like actual empathy. All right. Fuck. All right. 10 minutes in. We're good. Let's do this. So Lucilla grew up in a narco-infested town. Oh, that's why I brought this up. So like in the book, it'll be like it'll be like, oh, Lucilla, she worked at the stand with her parents, and then these guys would always come in and do this thing in like, and her parents would just like give them money, and then they would leave and not buy anything, and I'd be like, Mama, como, blah blah blah, whatever. And the mom would be like, "Oh, hush! Just that's how things operate around here." And then it's like later on, I found out it's because they were narcos. And then the writer is like, "A narco is defined as a," and goes on and on and on and on. And it's just like, and it doesn't just happen here. It happens like the 50% of this book, like no lie, at least. I didn't measure this, right? So I'm going to say it felt like 80% of this book was just explanations and definitions on things. Like at some point we get to like heart surgery, and it's like heart surgery, and I'm like, oh my god, like I know the gist of what heart surgery is. Like I don't. You go into the heart and you do surgery. Like I don't need to a vast like people in Japan aren't retarded. Like okay, you want to explain what narcos are because most people don't understand like in America, right? But you're a Japanese writer, so like that's even further away. They're just like, what's a narco? Like I get that, right? But it should be like, Mama, what's a narco? Or like, Mama, what do these people do? And it's like, oh, these people do blah 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 blah, and this is how they operate, and yada yada. And it's like, oh, Mama, that sounds, and have like the characters like talk about it. That's all. And then it's just like, okay, and then, oh, Mama, what are these people called? And it's like, well, the Americanos call them like narcos. And it's like, okay. And then later on, you can just say like narco, right? I'm not a writer. Like I've written books, sort of. I've written short stories. I think I have written a book, and it just like exists somewhere on some hard drive. Anyway, but like I'm not a writer, right? I just write for fun, for me, kind of like these videos that no one watches. So whatever. But at the same time, it's like you need an editor to just be like, take all this shit out. Like, what is this? You're writing like a technical document, and then someone's like, this is really boring. You should have a story around this. Like, that's what it felt like. I feel like the story was superfluous to like the explanation about like every little minute thing that goes on. Like, oh, this guy's in Indonesia and he's running like a snake, he sells snake to tourists. And then we spend like 25 pages talking about like cutting up snakes and catching snakes in Indonesia and how you got to drain the poison out and how it's like a show. And it's like, can you just have the characters do it? And can you just describe the characters actually literally doing this? Because then you go back to the character story, and then you're just like, oh, he cut the snake and gave it to him. And I'm like why was this all this other extra bullshit in this thing? Like, Jesus Christ. All right, I think this is the last time I'm going to talk about this. Hopefully, I just want to get through this. Like, I was not looking forward to making this video because this book was so boring. But the plot's really quick, so the rest of this should be actually this probably won't be that long of a video compared to like fucking everything else I do. But okay. I think that's all the preamble. All right, so Lucilla grew up in a narco-infested town in Mexico. And at some point, Brother's like, I'm going to get out and send you guys money. I'm going to cross the Rio Grande and stuff. And then he goes and gets killed. And part of the reason he got killed by the narcos is because he tried to go, instead of utilizing the narcos and their coyotes to get across the border, he was like, I'm going to find some other way. And the narcos are like, ooh, do, 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 and mask and kill them. And so she's like, I got to get the fuck out of here. And she's like 11, I want to say, around this time, maybe 12. And so she flees to Acapulco, which is in southern Mexico. Because the most narco activity, and I know I'm going off on a tangent, is in the kind of northern sectors, like in Monterey and in California, not California, U.S., California, Mexico, like Tijuana and stuff. And so once you start heading south to like De Jefe, which is the capital, or like the Yucatan, then the narco operations tend to kind of like dissipate out. So Acapulco's like down south. It's like a touristy spot. So like the narcos kind of like stand back because they don't want like America to get too involved or cared about what's going on. So she works down there for a while as just like a hostess or a waitress somewhere. She has a friend that she starts developing with a Peruvian girl. Don't worry about her. She leaves and never shows up again. And this happens like a lot in this book. You get a lot of characters that like start being described as like important characters to like other characters' stories, and then they never come up, or when they come up, you've completely forgotten who they were because it's been like 15 chapters since they were around. So this random Peruvian girl is like, I'm going to go to Japan, which is Spanish for Japanese for Japan. And then so she heads off, and then she has to get like a visa and all this stuff. And then Lucilla is like, oh, I should go to Japan too. Get the fuck out of here. Like, instead of going up to America, I'm going to go find a better life in Japan, even though I don't speak Japanese. Because I'm sure she's like, I'm sure I can find like an immigrant population there. And so she finds it pretty easy to get to Japan because Mexico has some sort of deal. So the Peruvian girl had to get a visa to visit. But it's like if you're American listening to this, which most likely are, going to most countries, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to get a visa. You just have to have like a passport, and you just get your passport and you just like roll over to that country. And then like this takes place in like the 70s, I think. at the start, maybe even earlier. It's like you didn't even really need a passport. You could just get on a plane and go, and you just have to tell somebody. Like you're like, oh hey, I'm going to Japan, and they're like, all right, well if you're going to be there longer than like 6 months to a year, you got to like come into the embassy and get like an actual like work certificate or something. And she's like, cool. So she literally just like saves up, buys a plane to Japan, and goes. I think it was a 6-month visit. Yep. Oh no, she needed a passport. I see that now in my notes. Okay, so she used a passport, which she had anyway for some reason. So in Japan, she ends up working at a hotel cleaning, and she's doing that for a while, and then she's super pretty. So at some point, her boss is like, hey, there's like this illegal casino operating over here, and like you would do great over there, and like you don't have to be able to speak Japanese or anything. And if you want, you can get a job there, and you'll make like 3 times as much money. And she's like, oh, hell yeah, let's do that. So she goes there, and she starts working there. Things are going pretty well there. And then one day, she's just is sick, right? Just happenstance, and like can't make it into work. And then the casino gets busted up, and everyone goes to jail but her, because she's just like, oh fuck, because she missed work because she was feeling sick. So it was happenstance. So, and that happens a lot too. There's just a lot of happenstance in this book. That's just like, oh, lucky her. It's like, I guess like it happens once or twice, that's fine. Like shit like that happens in real life, but in this book, like a lot of events occur because of like random happenstance, because people kind of just luck into situations. And again, it's so boring. Like, and that it's like, yeah, stuff like that happens in real life, but usually it's not interesting. So at that point, she heads to a different casino or a different group. Like she contacts like the Yakuza, whoever she was running this casino, and they're like, oh, we got another one up in Kyoto. So she goes there, and then while working at that casino, she visits like the cigar bar to like chill, to like drink and like smoke cigars or whatever, to relax, because she's just like stressed out and like miserable and life's awful, and she has no friends. And there she meets. Oh no, okay. So this happened in Osaka, I think, is where they were originally at. And while she was working there before the casino got shut down at the cigar bar, she met this guy who was like a Yakuza lieutenant, so kind of high up in the thing. And he had a place, okay, so they were in Osaka. So then he offers her a job at some point in Kyoto, and she's like, well, I'm already working here. But he's like, all right, well, if you have anything, here's my number and my address. Come on up, because you're a beautiful like Latina girl, and I would love to have you as part of like my club or whatever. And so she has this remembrance as she's like, oh fuck, what am I going to do now? I'm in so much trouble. So she calls this gangster, and she's like, I don't want to work at a legal casino again. He's like, well, I got a hostess club, which is legitimate. Hostess clubs are like these clubs in Japan where you go and like you buy women like drinks, and they like flirt with you. That's pretty much it. You can have sex. It's like sexy stuff too, but it's supposed to be, it's more legitimate, so it's not technically a brothel necessarily. But in Japan, like prostitution laws are pretty low key. Like, you know, it's like Eastern Europe or like most of Europe, where like brothels are just like a thing, or like the internet with OnlyFans. it's pretty much like OnlyFans but in person. Anyway, and so this dude's he runs like this hostess club, and then he runs this harbor, and then he's got some illegal businesses because he's obviously a member of the Yakuza. And so she moves there, and then essentially they like hook up, they shack up, you know, they'll get married because he's the Yakuza lieutenant, he's too cool for that. But then they start banging, and she's working, and things are like going all right. She's not like super pleased with the whole situation, but she's like, well, better than the fucking narcos. I can like come home and just like watch TV and like not be bothered about all that shit. So eventually they have a son, Koshima, and Koshima is like one of the main characters, sort of. Like he is like the main character, but we spend like 4 chapters here with him or so, and then we don't see him for like half the book. And he shows up and he's like aged, and it's just one of those things where it's like okie dokie, and then like the rest of the story is essentially his story. But so Koshima is, you know, his parents are terrible. His mom is like starts doing drugs, right? Starts doing ice or whatever. And then the Yakuza guy is doing Yakuza stuff, so he's never around. And so he doesn't really learn Japanese that well. His mom reads to him in Spanish, and she complains to him all the time. And she doesn't do ice, she does heroin. So she starts doing heroin, and she's like, I refuse to do cocaine because of narcos, but this is okay. And so then like things are just going, he's going to school, things are like okay, I guess. And then the Yakuza stuff starts getting cracked down across Kyoto just generally, right? This was happening a lot in like the 80s. And so the dad, because he's part of the Yakuza, he loses a lot of his stuff, a lot of his prestige. His businesses kind of go belly up somewhat. So Lucille has to go start working at like a different hostess club somewhere else that is actually legitimate. And then this guy just like wanders around fighting people and being kind of crazy or whatever. And then Koshima's like, I never have food because my mom like works, and then comes home and just like, you know, passes out from like heroin use. My dad's never around. So he starts learning how to cook for himself. The only thing he really cooks for himself is like boiled chicken. And he just like steals money from his parents to like go buy food for himself and cook for himself. And then he just stops going to school because he's like, fuck this, I don't understand Japanese, and like I'm kind of like, he's kind of a dummy, it seems. But it's like, is he a dummy because of like the way he was raised, most likely, or is he like a dummy generally? And it seems, no, it seems like the way he's written in this book, he's not actually a dum-dum. He's just like situation, circumstance. He's a dummy because he never got like a good education or anything like that. So then he just spends his time whittling wood at the park, and he becomes very, very good at it. And there's this old man in a wheelchair there, and they don't really speak to each other until one day when Koshima is just minding his own business, some asshole high school kids. And at this point, it's been like 10 years. Like Koshima, I think, is in middle school around this time. And these high school kids, they're like looking for something, and they see Koshima, and they start harassing him, and they threaten to take his knife. And then the old man there is like, leave him the fuck alone. His dad is like, Yoda, blah, blah, blah. And these guys are like, holy shit, that's a Yakuza guy. I know that guy. Like, he loves to wander around and just fight people. So they back up. And then one of them like is like, I'm going to fuck this kid up. And he does something. And then Koshima like knocks him out in one hit. And they're like, fuck. And then one of them just like throws money at him and runs away. And the old man's like, ooh. And he picks up the money and he keeps some of it. He's like, finder's fee. And then he gives the rest to Koshima. And Koshima's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this? And he's like, good job, it's your payday. And in my head, I was like, oh, this is fun. Is he going to be like a Yakuza member or whatever? Like the first, like, up to like maybe chapter 10, I had like a lot of hopes for this book. I was like, oh, is this going to turn into, this is like a sad origin story for like something. For a kid who does like kickboxing or like a boxing anime or whatever. And they're like, no. Everything gets stat. Like at the beginning of this book, I'm like, I'm not really feeling this. But once we got into Koshima, and it's like all this, I mean, we spent like 2-3 chapters with him just saying this old man and stuff. And then he gets really into basketball here too. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is going to be like a basketball anime where he like gets into like, he like turns his life around. And it's like, au contraire. So then like time goes by, the old man used the, we find out that he lost a lot of his money to like gambling essentially, but that with this, that with the money he got from this high school kid was pretty wealthy apparently, because he bought like a little TV, like a little portable TV, and he's just watching basketball. And Koshima's like, what's this? And he's whittling and watching basketball with the old man. And Koshima becomes very entranced with it. And we spent a lot of time talking about like Japanese basketball here. This I'm not going to keep iterating this. I know I already said that, but this is just one example. It's like we spend like this whole chapter and the next chapter, maybe even the chapter after that, talking about how Koshima really likes basketball and he likes just shooting. He spends hours every day shooting the basketball, and it's all set up for nothing, because nothing comes of it at all. And it's like, why the fuck? Well, this is poor story writing. Like, this doesn't go anywhere. Like, what the fuck is this? And again, it's like Catcher in the Rye or some of these other shitty books they make you read, where it's just like people just ramble on about nothing and the story doesn't go anywhere, and people are like, classic. And I'm like, how is this a classic? This is boring as shit and it doesn't make any sense. And then everything you learn about writing a coherent story, you're like, these people threw it out the window. And I'm like, yeah, and they wrote shit and it's awful and I have no interest in reading it. It's like, no, it's very provocative or some bullshit. And I'm like, you know what's provocative? This video is going to go on YouTube. I'm not going to get into it, but you can find stuff. Check out my BitChute channel on Thursdays. We'll talk about evocative fuck. Anyway, so he's like, oh, so he goes to buy basketball with the money he got from the high schooler. And then we find out that he takes all these whittled sticks like every day, and he takes them all, and they're beautiful and have all this like intricacy. And this part's actually important, I guess, if in the overall arching narrative. But he puts them in this like, he throws them on the roof of this old abandoned factory. And then there's just like a funny story about him being stupid. Like, he thinks he has to get a basketball from like electronics store because the basketball team they're watching is like the Hitachi or Kawasaki basketball team. Because back in like the 80s, the Japanese, their kind of like semi-professional league was all like business sponsored. It was like, what's that called? It was not a public affairs. It was like advertising essentially. But he's like, oh shucks. So as he's heading home, he sees his mom getting ready for work. He thinks about how beautiful she is if she wasn't on drugs or whatever. And then he gets chewed out for asking for money so he could buy food. And then later on, Koshima's family is forced to move again because of like situations with the club and doing drugs and everything else. So eventually he just starts stealing whatever he wants. So he finds like an actual sports store, steals a basketball. It becomes his like most prized possession. And sometimes he has money and because he steals. He goes to games in town. He like watches these games and he loves it. And then eventually he tries to find the old man, but the old man died in a traffic accident. And that's it, right? Again, it's like, we got to introduce this character. He seemed like he was going to be important. And then he just like dies off screen. And it's like, okie dokie. One day, Koshima comes home. He finds his father beating up his mother. And then the father then turns on Koshima and attacks him. But Koshima, we start to get information that he is like super big. Like, he is like extraordinarily like 99.999 percentile of height and weight. And so he's like, even though he's like 12 or 14 at this point or something, he is like huge and strong because he just wanders around and plays basketball like all day by himself. And so Koshima just like knocks him down. And so the dad runs downstairs to get a knife because they live above like a butcher shop at this point. And then he slashes and cuts Koshima's neck, and then he stabs the basketball. And stabbing the basketball is like an unpardonable sin because Koshima is like attached to it because he has no attachment with his parents, and so he fucking kills his dad. And then his mom attacks him, thinking that she is her husband, and that the husband is the dead brother because she's like, I totally out of it with like heroin and getting beat up, and so he kills her too. And then the police come. And they pick up Koshima, and Koshima gets like, and then we get introduced to this police officer that like never comes up again. We get this whole backstory about how this police officer used to do this thing, and he used to like hang out with Yakuza guys, but he decided to go straight, and that he used to be in boxing clubs and all this stuff. And then the character like never comes up again after this chapter. Like, what the fuck, man? I hate this book. It's like we're at like chapter 8, and already we get introduced to like 4 to 5 different characters. Like Lucilla, we spent like 2 whole chapters on her life journey, and then she's just like dies ignominiously, which is fine. But it's not just her. It's like everybody. Like constantly, we just introduce these characters and these ridiculous backstories, and then it's just like, and they're dead, and it's like, what the fuck? And then it's all to point out that like, oh, this guy's like fought real men and been boxing, and like the size of Koshima's arm is like bigger than it should be for like a 14-year-old. And it's like, I'm like, and he would know because he used to do like arm wrestling tournaments, and I'm like, I don't. You can just say he's got a big arm, and some lady can be like, yeah, it's crazy, right? And I'd be like, got it. Jesus. Anyway, everyone's shocked that he killed the dad because the people knew the dad. Like, he was like Yakuza lieutenant in the area. It's like very impressive. And like, holy shit, we're going to do with this guy. And they keep calling him like a monster. And they're like, oh, maybe this will go somewhere. And it doesn't really go anywhere ever. And then so Koshima obviously gets juvenile detention for murder. And then he's like, do they have basketball there? And the police are like, what the fuck? And like, why'd you do it? And he's like, because we popped my basketball. And then we leave Koshima for like 90% of this book until the very end. At least he fucking comes back, I guess. We hit him up like every like 10 chapters. They'll be like, oh, what's Koshima doing? He's in juvenile hall. Everything's fine. Okay, move him back. And then we focus on like the actual protagonist or antagonist or like the actual main character of the story, who's this narco in Mexico. So in Mexico, there's like this huge cartel war going on, and the one side gets like a drone and bombs the shit out of the other one, and it's like this family of brothers, and there's only one survivor. And so we just get all these like stupid tricks that he uses to head south and like head out of Mexico through the south because they think he's going to go north. And so obviously they have some connections with whatever. And he's like, I'm going to rebuild from scratch. And so this guy, I don't know or care about this guy's name. He's going to be Cartel Guy. So Cartel Guy continues south. He's thinking about catching a ship to Japan from like Veracruz or something, where he was raised, and he was raised by his abuela. And then, holy shit, y'all, are you ready to get like Aztec theology spit at you for like for like the rest of the goddamn book? Because like this, if anything, this book is like, hey, you should be an Aztec god. You should worship the Aztec gods and do human sacrifice, because it is like dick red in Aztec beliefs like hard in this book, like continuously. And it's like the whole rest of this is like chapter 10, right? And we've already invested in characters that do not matter for the main story, and then we just spend like it's not even pages, like chapter after chapter after chapter, learning about like the Mayans and the Aztecs. And the Mayans and the Aztecs are completely different nations that had nothing to do with each other. But the Mayan calendar comes up a few times, and I'm like, the Aztecs did not use the Mayan calendar. They used their own goddamn calendar. Assholes. Oh, God. So anyway, so the abuela was a true believer in the Aztec ways, right? And then we get her story. We get this huge story. Okay, so we go back in time now. So we get introduced to this cartel guy, and then we learn that he was raised by his abuela, and then we go all the way back to like when she was a child, and she was raised as like she was 100% like Aztec, like native, right? When like the Spanish came and like took over Mexico. So now we're going back to like the 1800s and everything. So this rich Spanish guy married her because she was beautiful, of course. Everyone's beautiful. And then she continues carrying on her traditions, the whole thing and then we learn about like the Mayan calendar and the 52-year cycle and like the resurrection of life and like the end of the 52-year cycle. It's not the end of the world, it's the end of like that world, and then the world gets like reborn through like human sacrifice or some bullshit. We learn about her name, which I don't care, and it's not important. How it's tied to worshiping the Aztec gods and being like one of their chosen. She continues to worship even though everyone's Christian. She knows she's got to be really secret about it, like killing chickens and doing like witchcraft and stuff because they might burn her at the fucking stake. And then she has a son. And that son has 5 boys. And one of those 5 boys is the cartel guy who survives. Anyway, so then her husband at the time gets bit by a dog and dies of rabies. And then and then her son gets married to some other chica. And then they have the 5 boys. And she doesn't teach him about the Aztec gods because she's scared of her husband. And then like the wife is like really like her daughter-in-law is kind of an asshole too. And she kind of just keeps it to herself, keeps doing her thing. But then one of the grandchildren, so one of the 5 children dies of getting bit by a dog of rabies. And she's like, oh, this is my punishment for denying the gods. So it's time that I teach you, therefore, about all the Aztec gods. And then like chapter 12 and 13, and 12 and 13 are all about fucking like literally my notes for chapter 12 are she teaches the boys about the Aztec gods and life in the Aztec Empire. And then chapter 13, and then we learn that her husband had this like empire of like shipping and all this stuff, and then the son, who is the son of Abuela, who's the father of the cartel kids, he runs the business into the ground because he doesn't know what he's doing, and eventually he has to like turn to the cartels to run illegal stuff through his business, and becomes very wealthy. But then he gets sloppy, and so the cartels kill him, and so the kids are like they swear by like the Aztec gods they're gonna do all this stuff. Oh, and also the abuela like sacrificed her son to the Aztec gods and got like 4 days in prison, and then she continued to raise the grandchildren like Aztec warriors for the rest of their lives. And then they went and got revenge on the guy who killed their dad, who was a Sicario. Sicario were like the hitmen for the cartels. And they became like ruthless killers. And then Abuela finally dies in like her old age, and she's like beloved by like her grandchildren, and it's super nice. She gets buried like as an Aztec princess, and they sacrifice some like people to her to like take her hearts to like, it's pretty crazy. Anyway, so then we finally get back to the cartel after like 4 chapters of that bullshit. And he escapes south to Argentina, and then he takes a ship to Africa, and then to Australia, and then he finally makes his way to Indonesia. And so and then we go like part 2, right? So the guy ends up in Jakarta, and he uses like the money and drugs he has left over to start a food cart. And this is where we get like the Stella Cobras, or the snake cobra, or I think they call them Stella Cobras. But he starts cutting up snakes and selling them while he's working on like an underground like drug trade or whatever. And then at some point it's Ramadan, and so he's just kind of hanging out by himself because it's Jakarta, and Indonesia has like the largest population of Muslims in the whole world. Like it's like super majority Muslims. So like Ramadan, the whole place like shuts down. But like Muslims are actually pretty chill outside of like the Middle East, and so. They're chill there too. It just depends where you're at. And so he's just like doing his business. Like he's left alone to do it, but no one's really buying anything. The tourists still come around. Some Canadian tourists come by. He talks about praying to the Aztec gods and stuff. And then a Chinese guy comes by, and he's like, "Oh, these Chinese guys." And the guy's like, "No, I'm Japanese." And he's like, "I don't care." And the guy's like, "I want crack." And he's like, "Cool, let's do it." Anyway, so then he starts selling crack to the Japanese guy. The Japanese guy is Tanaka. He's the Japanese guy I mentioned at the very beginning. He's the other main character, sort of. Like, he's like the third main character. The main character is the narco. The second main character is Koshima, and the third is this Tanaka guy. He's very important for like the part 2 here, the midsection, but then in the part 3, I forgot he existed until the very end when he gets killed. And I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. So then the cartel guy, like, he spends some time investigating Tanaka, making sure he's not a cop or whatever, trying to get his background. And then we switch to Tanaka completely for like a chapter or 2. And we get all this fucking bullshit, unnecessary information about underground surgeries, about organ harvesting in Indonesia, and how people want like Japanese hearts we get that later, organs, because Japan is a very clean place and stuff. And so they'll pay top dollar for it. And then Tanaka, he had like a whole thing where he was like a heart surgeon, and then something happened and he got into cocaine because everyone needs cocaine because being a surgeon, blah, 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 blah. And then somebody's supposed to meet up with Tanaka so he can take his heart out and sell it to like the five rings or whatever, like a Chinese mafia that's working out of Jakarta or something like that. And then he finds out that a Chinese gangster stole the organ donor. And so he goes to the narco for help, and he's like, "Hey, I need some help." And so they go find the Chinese guy, they grab him up, they torture him so he can get the organ donor guy. And the narco uses like liquid nitrogen to smash his fingers up and stuff, and then they kill him. And we also find out that during this whole time, Tanaka had contacted like the gang. He was working for like a different Chinese gang or Filipino gang or something, and that they had like relations with the Chinese gang that this guy belonged to. And so they contacted. He's like, "Hey man, one of your fucking dudes like stole one of our guys, but don't worry, we took care of it. We just want to let you know." And they're like, "Cool, sorry about that. Our bad." And it's like, "No, that's fine. You owe us." And like, what about, did you kill? So a guy got killed. He's like, "Oh, he got tortured and killed." And they're like, "All right, well, I guess that's good enough." Like, we get a whole conversation about that. And so then they start up with like an organ donating thing. No, they go find the organ donor. They take him to do the organ transplant, which goes well. And then, and And so then the narco and Tanaka start the surgeon. If I forget his name, I'll just call him the surgeon. Same guy though. So Tanaka and the narco, they start talking about the big money's in hearts. So they're taking kidneys and stuff, right? So anyone can donate a kidney or whatever. But if you do hearts are like big money because hearts are like quick and it's a huge investment and like you got to get them from dead bodies or like almost dead bodies. And so then they come up with this whole scheme. And part of it is because after they do the organ transplant with this guy, they're going to kill him. And he's like, do you mind if I sacrifice his heart to Kepe Copley or whatever? And he's like, no, you go nuts. so he watches him do it, and Tanaka's like, damn, what the fuck? And then Tanaka tells, then we get a whole explanation about Japan being super clean and the best place to get hearts because you get the most money because rich people are going to want like a nice environment for the heart and all that stuff. And then him and the narco talk a little bit about starting a heart transplant, like underground, illegal kind of thing in Japan and here in Indonesia and how they're going to do all that stuff. And then we switch away from them completely to like the social worker lady. And I guess you could say she's kind of like a main character. She's like the fourth, like she gets some airplay here and there. Like she at least is around to like nearly the end of the book at this point, but she only comes up sporadically. It's not even focused on her. It's just we learn about this primary school. There was some shit going on with this social worker like goes home and does coke to like get over it because she's like freaking out because it's like she's going to lose her job and she's going to have a hard time finding another job because it's Japan and like her honor's been besmirched by working at this place with all these violations and there's like protests in the news and stuff. And then at some point sniffing the hitting the cocaine via nasal cavity is not doing it for her, so she starts shooting up instead, and she doesn't like sniffling at the school. And then at some point, her dealer is like, hey, you should talk, like she gets sick or something. And so he's like, hey, you got to go talk to this. She's like, I don't want to go to a hospital because then they'll see that I'm doing drugs and all this stuff. He's like, well, there's this underground clinic. You should go there. And she's like, okay. So she goes and she's like shocked by how nice it is. And then the doc, she spends all this time talking about the doctor looks funny, but he's extremely professional. That's because he works for like the Yakuza. He's like a gang doctor, and he's one of the organ transplant guys that works for Tanaka specifically and the narco. And that he was assigned to find some women who like help children. And so the way they help children is that they find children who are not like. So there's like a whole thing. We get this whole explanation, which is important just to note for this. I'm trying to think about how to sum up very succinctly. Is that there's certain children that are born and never registered as being members of like Japan's country, and they exist because women don't register them or they were like rape children or something anyway. And then they're usually raised by like these single mothers who are not really paying attention to them. They usually end up in crime or whatever. And so it's like a whole thing in Japan in like the 80s. I don't know if it's still going on, but they're looking for like a nice, kind woman who kind of knows the system, like the social worker lady, and they're going to hire her. And what she's going to do is she's going to track down these children and like pay the parents off for the children and then bring them to like a primary center they have set up here in the hospital. And the children are going to have like Xboxes and be able to chill and play and have a good time and then get their organs transplanted, right? But like no one's going to track them. Like they're not even registered in the government system. So when they disappear, it's like no one cares. Their parents don't care. No one's going to track them. It's like it's completely like genius. But she's not going to know anything about it. She's just thinking they're like sending these kids off for adoption. And so he recruits her to the organization, and it's like excellent. And she does a fantastic job getting kids away from like abusive parents or like undocumented kids and bringing them to the doctor. And this special like underground secret nursery. It's like the kids are having a great time. And then, like I said, it's when they harvest their hearts, essentially, they just they tell this woman that like, oh, they got adopted by a foreign family and sent away, so you'll never see them again. We then get one chapter about Koshima and how he's just violent in the detention center, but the same thing, he just gets like left alone. He starts having these crazy nightmares about like Aztec gods and stuff. And now he's even like bigger. And he continues to just sit and whittle and carve things and whatnot. Back over to the narco, we find out that he's heading to Japan to like set up his organization even more and to get like real money going and to build like his cartel and stuff. And then the doctor has to go through like a different means. He has to like secretly sneak back into Japan, like the Tanaka, because he got like ousted from the whole thing. So he has to travel by secret from Jakarta to Hong Kong and then get on like a crew, like a Yakuza like shipping vessel to come back into Japan. And while that's going, the narco's just like chilling, thinking about his family, and he has a nightmare about the Aztec gods, which is similar to Koshima's, right? So once they get there, they have the organ transplant stuff that Tanaka's kind of in charge of, and the cartel member obviously gets back into the drug trade of Japan, and he starts off very cautious because he doesn't want to interfere, or he wants to get ignored by the Yakuza essentially because he's like an outside entity. So he does everything he can because he's trying to just build up. Once he gets bigger, then he can like fight the Yakuza. But for now, it's like he's just trying to do his own secret thing. At this point, we get introduced to like another fucking character But again, in like the grand scheme of like the Narco and Koshima, who are like the main characters, he's actually important. So he's a Peruvian guy who like makes knives. This whole story about him being in like half Japanese, half Peruvian, and how he grew up very poor in Okinawa, but then he started working on knives and he was excellent at it, and he got a corporate job making knives to support his family, but that like he was being underutilized because he's old and he couldn't go start his own business because he didn't have enough money and he couldn't get a better job, yada yada yada. And so eventually the Narco and his team meet up with him, and they hire him and they give him like his own shop to just like make knives and stuff and like work on a lot of what they're doing is part of like the children. They'll like bleach their bones and then they call them like seal bones or something, and then they use the bones to make like knives and other things, and then they sell those too. So like this Narco is like exceedingly good at like expanding his like illegal businesses. He's like, I will use every drop of that child's life to like make money. Like Jesus. So yeah, it's a lot of making cups out of skulls and all this kind of crazy stuff. And the knife guy's like, well, and it's like, they pay a lot of money, your family's taken care of, don't worry about it. And it's like, all right. And then we switch over to a totally new guy, and this guy's like a psychopath. He killed a guy, didn't care about it, was in jail, was a model prisoner, so only got like 11 years. He comes out. He continues to kill at his job. He works at this like car parts place for like, one of those places that takes like illegal cars and strips them down so that people can like resell them or like whatever. And so the Narco and Tanaka come to see him, and they pay him to like raise this Argentinian like hunting dog. And these hunting dogs like hunt like jaguars. They're like very intense. And then after a while, he's like, oh, the dog's great. And he's like, all right, shoot the fucking dog in the head. And he's like, all right. So he does. And it's like, you're going to be a good Sicario because you're a cold-blooded fucking psychopath. And then we get a whole explanation about Sicarios. And they're just hitmen. They're just hitmen. They're like hitmen in the mafia. Don't worry, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Okay, and then we get the whole backstory about how it started in Colombia. There were kids in gangs. They would kill birds to prove stuff, and then Pablo Escobar started using them, and then they moved up to the Mexican cartels. Okay, back to Koshima in jail. So he's having a hard time. He's finally out, but he's having a hard time getting a job because he's a murderer. And so people don't look kindly to that. And he's just a big, angry-looking dude. It doesn't look quite Japanese, right? But you know who would love to have this giant killer? That's right, Narco Boy here. So the social worker tracks down Koshima, takes him to the Peruvian knife guy, and has them, and they actually get along great. Like this, Koshima is like the son the Peruvian guy never had, and Peruvian guy is like the father Koshima never really had, and so they end up getting along like really good. And Koshima is so good at this fucking job because of the whittling stuff, right? Like, so he gets in there, makes like exceedingly fine like handles and like inscribes them excellently. And like if you like, hey, take this piece of paper and write your name, it's like illegible. But if you're like, hey, carve your name into this piece of like child bone, and it's like, wow, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It's like real artistic stuff going on. Okay, so then the Narco gets a bunch of guns, and he gets silencers, and then he started having his Sicario candidates like shooting things at places and practicing, and he hired this Salvadorian guy to come, and I say that just because the book says that. It's irrelevant. A lot of these people are just like, this guy's Peruvian. Why? I don't know, just because. It's a Salvadorian guy, helps him with the firearms, hides the firearms, practices shooting faster, and then he has these Sicario candidates fight a bull, like a literal like fucking cow bull, and kill it, and they do, and they survive. There's 3 of them. I said 2 earlier, but there's 3 at this point. Let's see. Oh yeah. So then we go back to the Peruvian guy and Kushima guy. We just learn more about the human bones and how they call them cow bones or something else. Then so the auto guy is kind of sad about all the criminal, like he was like, I was like a low-level criminal just doing my own thing and paying off cops and stuff, and then these narco came along, and now it's like I got these dogs around here, and I hate this, and I just wanted a simple life, whatever. And he has this Brazilian guy who's working for him, and he wants to move up in the organization, and so he comes up with this really like bad plan. And part of this plan is that Koshima gets sent over by the Peruvian guy to deliver bones, so the dogs can eat like some of the children bones and do that. And when Koshima gets there, the guy, he's this whole thing where he's going to like release the dog by accident, and he's going to kill Koshima, and then the Brazilian guy's going to like kill the dog and be like, oh, I had to do this thing because he hates working with these dogs, but like I saved I saved his life, or blah 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 blah. And then at some point the narco contact, or get the Peruvian guy, the knife guy, gets contacted by the narco, and he's like, hey, go get Koshima. And he's like, I don't know where this guy's at. I haven't seen him for a while. Maybe that dog finally fucking killed him. Those dogs are crazy. So he heads over to get Koshima, and Koshima's just hanging out there, and he's like, you okay? And he's like, yeah, to kill this fucking dog that attacked me. And he's like, oh. And we got like the whole story was like the dog, like Koshima, like it ran. So the guy released the dog, and the dog attacked him, and then it moved on to Koshima, and the Koshima just was like one punched man to death, and it was like, okay. And so then he takes Koshima over to this Peruvian restaurant that is with the narco's using for like his main front in Japan. So he goes in, he meets a narco. They talk about killing a dog, and then Koshima's like, yeah, I punched it in the face and it died. He's like, I want you to be a member of my family. You're going to be like my son. And Koshima's like, sure, that sounds dope. And so then he goes to hang out with the other narcos, and he gets the name. Oh, yeah, everyone has like secret names, right? So his name is Gallows because he's fucking crazy. And so then there's like an arm wrestling thing. And these like, I don't remember where they're from. These assholes from like some other place, Australia or something. They're like doing, these luchadors from Mexico are doing like arm wrestling competitions. And then Koshima goes over there and just like beats the shit out of everybody. And they're like, fuck. And then they almost get into like a battle. But then the other narcos come down and they give them like then the narco comes down and gives the luchadores what they want, like what they were paying for, like drugs and stuff. And then they leave. And again, this is just to emphasize that Koshima is like super strong, I guess. And then the Brazilian guy who released the dog. So the Brazilian guy, he got attacked by the dog, and then Koshima. No. God, I'm trying to remember. My notes just say the Koshima killed the dog. So he must have gone, and the Brazilian guy's like, "Fuck, I'm fucked," because like, why'd you release the dog and whatnot? And so the surgeon, not Tanaka, this other surgeon's kind of hanging out with the Brazilian guy, and it's like, hey, it's gonna be real bad for you real soon because they're gonna sacrifice you. And the surgeon, he doesn't say that, he's thinking about it, and he's like, such a waste of materials. We could like sell this part for this much, this part for this much. And then the Sicarios and the narco shows up, and they do the human sacrifice. They have like the heart and the left arm and everything. And Koshima's like super entranced with this. Like, this is fucking awesome. And then we learn that the kids, as part of like their selling point to sell the hearts to rich people, is like they're very happy, and part of their happiness is tracked by they write these journals about how good life is, how much they enjoy life, and how great everything's going. And this is given to like the families who get like the hearts for their children, so they can be like, look, they're very happy and everything's going great, so they can make more money. Anyway, the whole heart thing's going well. We go into part 3, but so the heart thing continues to be good. The heart transplant thing, it's very precise, making lots of money. Everything's going well. And then Koshima, we learn, is adapting life to Sicario. He just hangs out with like, the guy starts being like, call me Papa, the narco, and he calls him like his son, his Mijo. And they're just like hanging out all the time, and he treats him like a son, right? And just hanging out doing like nothing. And then Koshima talks to, and then the guy starts teaching about the Aztecs gods, about the Jaguar, the Eagle Warriors, how they're Eagle Warriors because the Eagle Warriors are better than the Jaguar Warriors, and how the rain god is the strongest because without rain everyone dies. If there's no rain, the Jaguar and Eagle will die. Yada yada yada. And this again, we get like propaganda for like the Aztec religion for like 3 or 4 chapters. So he tells them about the whole thing with like choosing a person to be like god for the whole year, and that person gets treated like the king of the Aztecs and then sacrificed to release the god, and it's like such a great honor. Koshima makes an Aztec weapon. Like he takes like a rosewood paddle and then puts like the obsidian teeth in it. So it's like one of those, if you Google like Aztec weaponry, you'll see like it looks like a bat with like spikes on it. So he crafts this thing, and all the Sicarios like, whoa, motherfucker, that's awesome. And then the Peruvian guy's like, ooh, I'm not a big fan of this. I don't like how he's involved with all these things. Anyway, they finally get their first task. So they have to go. There's this Yakuza gang that wants a cut of like the narco's territory now that he's got. And there's a whole thing. So the narco is paying a Yakuza group to like a piece, and then they want to raise that piece because some Vietnamese gang called the Beelzebub like moved into this area in Japan, and they're very young and violent, and so the old Yakuza are having a hard time with them, so they're making less money. And so the narco, instead of paying the Yakuza more money, they're like, we'll take care of this group. So they do. So they send the narcos. This is like the most interesting part of the book because it's actually like a story that's going on. So they go and they trap the leader of Beelzebub. They kill all his top men, and it's just like a complete massacre. Like the narcos men like just devastate them with like super efficiency. And then instead of just killing the leader, they sacrifice him alive. And then they play basketball with his head, and they film it, and then they send it to like the Yakuza. The Yakuza are like, okay, yeah, 10%'s fine. Jesus Christ. It's so good. And then there's the whole thing with like a cruise liner because it's like COVID now, I guess. So we get to see all these people protesting this cruise liner, and I think the cruise liner is where they're doing the illegal surgeries or whatever, and they don't want it to come into dock because of COVID or whatnot. And there's a story about it. And then we find out that one of the kids who's supposed to get a transplant soon is being a super sad hippopotamus about this whole situation. and then we get introduced to like a new fucking character, and it's like almost the end of the book, and it's like this woman who's like the security for the place, and she used to be like Hong Kong SWAT essentially, and she got kicked out because she killed somebody, and the narco went and got her like immediately, and now she's just like hanging out here, and then like don't worry about it, that she never comes up again. Then back over to Koshima, he's having more dreams. He now recognizes in the dreams that he's having dreams about the Aztec gods and about the Black Mirror and all this stuff. And then the Peruvian guy is like super sad about being a criminal and how he wished he, could have just like made a life for his family without having to do all this stuff. Anyway, so then the doctor, not Tanaka, the doctor who like runs like the little clinic in the daycare, he goes to visit the troubled boy. He finds out that he has O blood positive, which means he's the best kind for donation because O positive blood can go to like anybody, or can go to anybody with positive, and O negative can go to like everybody. And so they're like, hey, this journal's not going to fly. It's all sad and crazy, so let's get Koshima to write it. And so, they're like, I need somebody else to write this. And they choose Koshima because Koshima writes like a fucking child. But Koshima's going to want to meet this kid so he can like get an idea of how he writes and how he functions. And I'm like, no, all this is unnecessary. Like, no one's going to... Oh, goodness. And there's this whole thing about like organs transferring memories. So they want the kid... It's just like some crazy nonsense. And so Koshima like gets read up on like the whole situation, and he goes to talk to the boy so we can write about him in like a happier way. And so he works with him for a while, and finally the kid opens up. He talks about how I smell blood, and I know like we're all going to get killed and whatnot. And at some point, the proving guy takes Koshima on a fishing trip, which is like very important for like how this whole pans out at the end of the story. So they go out in a canoe somewhere, and he tells them about Jesus and all this stuff. And Koshima's like, "Fuck Christianity! They killed the Aztecs." The proving guy is like, "They killed the Incas too." It's the same story, but like this, you don't have to like be Christian, but like this is a good story because he talks about how Jesus did not order them to do that, and that Jesus is like a pure person, and that Jesus wants obedience, not sacrifice, to like fight against like the Aztec teachings, right? And then at some point we find out that Tanaka has like betrayed the narco, that he's doing his own thing behind his back, and so now it's time for him to die. So I told you Tanaka would come back, and it's like the second to last chapter of the book or something. But like, yep, here he comes. And so he does something. It's something about selling skulls and pictures. It's something about selling like necropedophilia to child pornographers. These guys were for Australia. I think that's where I got this from. And let's see, and that he's using this money to invest in the Vietnamese drug trade, and that it's the same guy who like was sponsoring like the Beelzebub gang is involved. So there's like all this shit going on that like we spent all this time on like superfluous bullshit, but like this main story thing that has like drastic changes to like the lives of all these people is kind of just like hand waved away in like half a chapter. It's just like, oh yeah, these people are all tied, and this is connected to this connected to this. No explanation about the Vietnamese drug trade. Tanaka hasn't been in this book for like hundreds of pages. And so he's like, fuck. So he's like, I need a new heart surgeon from Indonesia to keep doing this thing, and we got to fucking kill this doctor. So he sets up a time to kill Sicarius to kill him, like right after this heart surgery of like the boy that Koshima's been working with. And then at some point the boy says something about a solar eclipse, and this causes Koshima to like put a whole bunch of stuff together in like his crazy mind about his father not sacrificing to the right God. He starts having like really bad nightmares, and his father is in like the narco. The power of the gods is the order of the power. He starts questioning a lot of stuff. Then he wakes up from the nightmare, and it's like, hey, it's time to go kill this doctor. And we find out Tanaka knows that he's being set up for a hit because he has like people on the inside, or he's like tracking something, and that he's been he hired hackers to hack into the narco's like computer system or something. And so he came up with this whole plan. So when the Sicarios come for the surgery, it's like in this locked chamber, and somehow he like lowers the oxygen level, and he's wearing like a mask so he can breathe. And so everybody starts collapsing, except two of the Sicarios are just like so powerful that they're just like, nope. And so the struggle ensues. And I think Koshima picks up like a shotgun and like blasts open the doors, like so that it unseals the room. And then Koshima like everyone gets like killed except Koshima. And then Koshima like cuts off the head of the doctor. And then he grabs the boy and he grabs the head and he starts walking out, and he runs into like the social work lady, and he gets her to drive them to like the knife shop. Meanwhile, the narco finally figures out that something's up because he hasn't heard anything. And so he heads to the knife warehouse, and at the warehouse, the proven guy gives instructions to go to the police and whatnot to like the woman. And then he tells Koshima like, hey, I got friends here, go take the ship and go to Panama and leave and never turn around and never come back. And then they leave. And then later on, the narco shows up, kills the Peruvian for not doing what he asked him to do, or like take care of the situation like he should have. And then he calls one of his guys who was going to track, because he had people along the route to get the heart to the ship just to make sure nothing happened or in case there was a crash. And the guy's like, oh yeah, there was a rental van that like the social worker was using that crashed on this bridge. And it's like, all right, so we're going to go back a little bit to the social worker. She's freaking out because she doesn't want to like, she's going to get, if they go to the police, they're going to like want to search her place, and she's got a bunch of cocaine. So instead of going straight to the harbor like she should have, she goes back to her place because she needs to get the cocaine out of there before they go to the police. And Koshima doesn't know what's going on, and the kid's like unconscious somewhat still. He's okay, but that's at that point, that's where she crashes on this bridge, and then she's crying. And then Koshima's like, oh, the Aztec god inside, like my eagle vision or whatever is telling me that the Papa's coming, so I got to figure that out. So he leaves the van and to set up like a trap, and he grabs the lady, and they all hide. So the narco shows up, And then Koshima like takes off his shirt and he's got all these tattoos and he's giant thing and he's got his fucking like axolotl, or no, that's a spear thrower. It's his fucking like club, and so he hops out, and then the narco's like super excited, and he like pulls out a knife or like a machete so they can fight to the death, and he's like, yes, my God, take me. And so they both like fall off a bridge supposedly to their death. At that point, the social worker's like, what the fuck? And so she goes and gets in the narco's jeep and heads to Tokyo. And then the book like ends, and it's like the death of the death of the narco happened exactly 500 years from the fall of the Aztec Empire, and like, you know, it's poetic, I guess. And when I say into the book, that's into the main story. So then we get an epilogue, and this thing kind of bounces around to different people. So then we go to like a prison in Mexico, and some gangster who knew the narco finds out that he's dead, but that his son's missing. And then we head over to Okinawa. And it's the Peruvian guy who got killed, right? His family's just like in Okinawa chilling, like his wife's shopping, and she's like, oh, I forgot something. So she starts the car and tells her daughter, like, wait in the car. And then Koshima rolls up with some other guy. And he's like knocking on the window, and she's like trying to roll it up, and he like grabs the window and he starts shoving envelopes full of money into there. And then so he clearly survived and whatnot, and who knows what happens to him. It's not important. It's not actually there's just no characters in this book except the Aztec gods, I guess. Because then we go back in time, and we go back to like the Abuela. Remember Abuela? She's telling the kids about some Aztec stuff, Jaguar warriors, founding of the empire, and then we get like several stories in the epilogue about this bullshit, and then that's the end of the book. Under an hour, hell yeah. All right, so yeah, that's a Tezcatlipoca. It was all right. All my complaints stand. Yeah, I don't have much else to say. I did not enjoy it. It was long and boring and like all over I felt like it jumped all over the place, and like it didn't tell a coherent story or make a point or do anything. I got nothing out of this book besides this video, I guess. So I guess I got something out of it. But yeah, hope you're all I hope you're all doing great. And I'll catch y'all later. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch y'all later. Bye.